evening. Dumelang bagaetsho. Sanbonani. Goeienaand. We welcome you this evening on our second live stream episode, where we'll be discussing a number of important things. And obviously, we'll be expecting interaction from you. Tonight, I'm going to have a number of questions that I'm going to request that you respond to, because out of our program and sharing tonight, interaction tonight, we are going to cement and strengthen our policy as the ACDP. I think the most important thing that we will be talking about tonight is what has been in the media for some time. The story about Thabo Bester and his escape from prison. We're going to look at what happened, and we are also going to come with kind of solutions to ensure that such things, such escapes, do not happen again. But one of the fundamental questions that we'll have to ask is whether we agree with these private prisons. You know, the ACDP has been opposing from the beginning private facilities made for criminals, because we have seen very sad stories where crime would be committed, both the victim and the perpetrator would be injured, and then the victim would be taken to a public hospital, and the injured criminal would be taken to a private hospital. The ACDP has been opposing that for a number of years. Actually, in 1995, I wrote a pamphlet entitled Crime Eradication Strategy. It had 7 points. Maybe one day we're going to discuss them. But I gave that crime eradication strategy to the first Minister of Police in South Africa, the late Steve Tshwete. An interesting observation was made by a journalist who went through the document. And he said, if what you have written in this document can be followed and implemented as it is in the document, then crime will be reduced drastically, if not eradicated, in South Africa. So the ACDP, obviously, friends, has ideas we believe can help reduce crime drastically and ultimately eradicate it. So we're going to talk about that later. My two colleagues are going to join me. And before I mention them, we see Jamil Isop is saying greetings from KZN in Durban. And we have Melody Maseko, who's saying, good evening, Mr. President. He's sending her greetings here in Jozi, in Gauteng. And we have Linda Palesa Yates, who's also saying hi to everybody. Good evening. We have Mama Zibuko, who's also saying blessings and greetings, Mr. President. Thank you for tuning in. It is going to be a lovely evening, an enjoyable evening. And my colleagues will be coming on later on. Steve Swart, we are trying to get hold of him because he says he has load shedding at 8 o'clock. So we want to start with him if possible. But we also have Marie Sukers, who is also a member of parliament with us in Cape in Parliament. She also will be joining us and elaborating on what is known as the Bella Bill. encouraging us all to ensure that that bill is not passed. Because if we oppose it in large numbers, we sign petitions and we do all that she's going to advise us to do, then that bill will not see the light of day. There is an interesting verse that I want to quote here because we are all Christians here. And there is greetings and good evening from the Eastern Cape. Our MMC, Lance Grootboom, Otisom Puti, who says criminals are held in high esteem both in and out of prison. Obviously, what is the problem and how can we solve that problem? How can we make sure that criminals do not become role model to some of our children? These are some of the questions we are going to ask and also find solutions from you. Rodilov, shalom and blessed evening from Kimberley. Kimberley, the Lord bless you all. Thank you very much for joining. Fellow Christians, all the way from the Kapstad. Thank you, sir, for joining us tonight. We are going to have fun, as I said. In a few minutes, obviously, before we get into the Thabo Bester story, we are going to listen to our MP, Member of Parliament, Marie Sukers, who's going to warn us about what we to watch and what to do to prevent the enemy from doing what he wants to do. Obviously, I said I'm going to quote scripture. And that scripture, obviously, should encourage all Christians to go into action. Matthew 18:18, in the Good News Translation, there Jesus himself says, whatever you prohibit on earth will be prohibited in heaven. And whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. So we have to agree, friends, that if Christians can rise up and say, we don't agree with this, we don't want this, we don't permit this, according to the words of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, it will not happen. He will also ensure that heaven blocks it, stops it from happening. So as we approach the challenge of this Bella Bill, we need to come with faith, knowing that we are not just ordinary people. We are people with authority. All right? We are people with authority, spiritual authority, because what is behind this evil that is manifesting in the labor laws, in the health laws, in all of the laws that we are facing in the country is spiritual. So all problems we are facing and having today, they originate in the spirit, and there are those who have given themselves to do what the powers of darkness want them to do. I see my colleague Marie Sukers. I already say hello to her, but because Steve Swart has load shedding at 8 o'clock, we are going to maybe start with Steve. Steve, how are you, sir?
Good evening, President, and good evening to Mari. It's so nice to see you, and congratulations on this initiative. And I just want to endorse what you've just said about having all authority. We thank the Lord that we have got spiritual authority and we address all these issues from a spiritual dimension. So thank you, President, for inviting me onto the show. And I just trust that there are many people watching it because this is very informative and very important for us to be aware of these issues.
All right. You are going to share with us some important truths of what we can do to stop this hate crimes bill. Hate bill. What is hate? Before you come in, when the Constitution was written, 1995, one of the things that came in one of the committee meetings was discrimination. Who discriminates? And they said, well, obviously, if you say anything or do anything that hurts other people, that can be classified as that. Then I asked the question. And the question I asked was, as a Christian, because everybody knows, who knows me, no, I'm a Christian. I'm not a submarine Christian. I am a confessional Christian who is not ashamed of his faith. So I asked the question, 1995, if I say Jesus is the only way, would that be regarded as discrimination? They said, of course. Why? Because you, in essence, are saying other religions are wrong. So you are discriminating against them. So we need to be careful. The hate bill, hate crimes, hate speech, and all whatever phrase they can give. We need to be careful. We need to be alert so that our freedom of speech is not taken away from us because of this hate crimes bill that is now being debated. So my colleague Steve is going to talk more about that and also assure us that this is a battle that we can win. That is the approach we can take. Every battle we bring before you, every battle we say, Christian, rise up and do something about it, we can win that. So, Steve, my colleague, please go ahead, tell us more about this hate bill.
Well, thank you, President. Firstly, one's got it. The starting point for this is the Constitution, which allows for freedom of expression. It allows for freedom of religion. However, the right of freedom of speech is limited, and it does not extend in terms of Section 16.2 to obviously the propaganda for war and the incitement of imminent violence or the advocacy of hatred that is based on race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, and that constitutes incitement to cause harm. So those are the limitations on freedom of speech that have been accepted by our courts. And we had the act that was passed is Popuda, which civilly allows the state to take action against people, and we've seen action has been taken, and we know that there's a lot of racial incidents in our nation. So if you remember the Penny Sparrow case, if you remember other cases, those are civil remedies, not criminal remedies, civil remedies where people were brought before the equality courts for saying the most terrible things and were penalized, as well as in terms of the criminal existing law, which is crimen injuria. And so we from the ACDP side we condemn any racist utterances that amount to hate speech, and it's very prevalent in our nation. However, this bill, which has got two elements to it, the one is hate crimes and the one is hate speech. Now, hate crimes is where you might be motivated by something such as race, for example, to commit a murder. Then obviously it is more, this is an aggravating circumstance, and we as the ACDP did not have a major problem with the hate crimes aspect. But when it comes to the hate speech element, the problem is that this is a criminalization which will have a chilling effect on freedom of speech and freedom of religion as it is presently worded. Now, we in the ACDP have been fighting this battle for many years. We have succeeded in watering it down to a certain degree by putting in certain high thresholds into the bill. However, we are still not happy with it, and that's why we voted against it. And I just want to thank the President for allowing us the opportunity to unpack this, and he might ask some questions. But it's very important for us to understand that our courts have made a statement about what is permissible in terms of speech, freedom of speech, which needs to be balanced against utterances that are hateful. Now, it's very important, and this I quoted when I debated this issue in Parliament. It is in the Quilani judgment, hate speech is speech that travels beyond mere offensive expression and can be understood as extreme detestation or vilification, which risks provoking discriminatory activities against a group. Thus, expressions, this is very important, expressions that are merely hurtful, especially when understood in everyday parlance, are insufficient to constitute hate speech. Offensive language is protected by freedom of expression. So this is very important. Now, we believe that the present bill does not live up to that standard. We believe that it can impact very negatively when we as Christians exercise our expressions, exercise our beliefs. And this has been our problem. Now, if you look at the bill in particular, President, you will see that the definitions are very broad. For example, what is harm? What is harm? Harm is defined as substantial emotional, psychological, physical, social economic harm. What is emotional harm? How do you determine what emotional harm is? I can understand psychological harm, but this definition, and this is one of the problems with this bill, is these definitions are so very, very broad that it can canvas anything. And sadly, hate speech provisions have been used internationally to bring pastors and evangelicals to court who've been promoting the gospel and who've been saying things, and obviously, as you indicated, President, that Jesus is the only way, something like that. That could be offensive to someone else. They could feel that this has caused them emotional harm or psychological harm, and you could fall foul. And that is what has been used internationally. So we worked very hard on this bill as the ACDP, but we are still concerned about the groupings, about the issues relating to harm, and we believe that it does not accord with the Constitution and the limitations that are set out under Section 16(2) of the Constitution, and therefore this could well be unconstitutional. We voted against it, bearing in mind that there is already existing law. First of all, we said there's sufficient existing law to cover these issues, both from a civil perspective and from a criminal perspective. We've already seen, as I indicated earlier, examples of that. Why is it now necessary to bring in this hate speech bill with an 8-year criminal sanction imposed? It is easier to be found guilty of hate speech in terms of this criminal legislation than under the civil legislation of the other act. And this is a great concern. When you look at international jurisdictions as well, there are certain thresholds, because what the approach should be to protect freedom of expression. People must be able to express their views as long as it's not propagation of war, incitement for physical damage as set out under 16(2). You've got to have freedom of expression, freedom of religion. Those are very important. And so an international threshold is very high, which says you must only criminalize it as a last resort, hate speech. Under what I said, it goes beyond mere offensive expressions. And so, President, this is a deep concern of ours. It's a concern of many people in civil society, many churches, even journalists. We did succeed in putting in an exemption for journalists, for artists, for the religious communities, but we believe that exemption does not go far enough. And although it is a starting point, we believe that there are issues here that still need to be protected. So, President, what we are concerned is that this bill goes far beyond what is permissible in terms of the limitations under Section 16, freedom of expression. It impacts of religion, and it may well be unconstitutional because it goes beyond what the Constitutional Court found in the Kwelani judgment, and has the potential to limit freedom of expression, freedom of religion. And for that reason, although the ACDP has played a battle at the forefront in prayer and in motivating substantial tests, for example, where it previously said just emotional, psychological, and physical detriment, we now insist that it must be substantial and it must cause significant. So we've lifted the threshold. So we've tried to improve the bill, but we are still not satisfied with it. One of the very aspects of criminal law is that the members of the public must know exactly what the law is, so that when you break the law, you need to know what the law you break it. And the definition is so wide. Hatred itself is not defined. Harm is defined too broadly. The groups impacted by this are far too broad, that if you utter an expression or you say something, you do not know necessarily whether you're in breach of this legislation. And I think that is the challenge. Yes.
And so sorry to do this to you. Mary is in Kenya right now. And where she is, time is limited. She has to leave also within few minutes. Please hold it there. I hope that we'll be able to come back to you. But for now, Marie, welcome. Before we lose you, Madam, tell us, what is this Bella Bill about? Welcome,
Yes.
Marie.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, Steve, and good evening to the ACDP family that is on this live stream with us. Just one line that I want to add. I'm actually in Kenya at the moment, and the 4 days by invitation, we discussed parliamentarians in Africa, international parliamentarians from Europe, Asia, all over the world, freedom of religion and belief, or belief. And Steve is dead right. We had such live discussions as African MPs around the context of Africa and how faith, family, and tradition is important to us, and how these international instruments or international laws and treaties that many governments and many of our ministers sign has an impact on the way of life, actually, and how we need to, as parliamentarians, protect and fight for freedom of religion or belief within the African context. Very, very important. In terms of the Bella Bill, Mr. President, the ACDP has dubbed this bill the abortion bill. The reason why we have done so is we want to provoke our constituency, we want to provoke people of good faith, and we want to provoke the South African public. What has happened consistently over the last couple of years, we have seen more and more of parental rights being undermined through legislation by the states. And what we know in our country is that our country is in the social crisis we're in because of the breakdown of the family unit. Now, the Bella Bill, how does that fit into what I've just described? There is a clause that the ACDP is focusing on, and I am, for the sake of time, going to focus only on that clause. It is clause 41. You may have seen our videos and you may have heard me speak about this clause, but basically what clause 41 says, it provides the minister with broad powers to issue regulations. Very important what was said by Steve today in him speaking on the hate speech bill. And Steve is a constitutional lawyer. He said that if this becomes legislation, that people will be criminalized. It will carry a criminal penalty. It is exactly the same. When the minister in clause 41 has these broad powers to issue regulations, it means those regulations are enforceable by law. And if you do not abide by it, you can be criminally charged. And so what the ACDP's position is one, we say, how can we give the minister a blank check without knowing what the regulations are and who is advising the minister on these regulations and who's developing the regulations? And what we are saying to parents are, if the minister is going to issue regulations, those regulations are going to be in line with the policies of the department. And we know that the department has drafted transgender guidelines that are going to be implemented in schools in this year, 2023. We also know that the department has a policy on teenage prevention and management of teenage pregnancies, which contains the aim of it is, one, to give children access to contraceptives and for them to get access, if necessary, to abortions. And for schools, strategic partners, it says that in the policy, the department will form strategic partners to provide these services, and children would be able to be referred for contraceptive services, sexual reproductive rights, and abortion where necessary. Of course, abortion falls under sexual reproductive rights. We know that abortion forms part in this government's policy of that. So children as young as 12 can then be referred for an abortion by a school, by a teacher. And we are saying this undermines the rights of parents, and it is in contradiction to the African Charter. It is in contradiction to the universal recognized rights of parents. And we are saying clause 41 is the most insidious clause that is contained in this amendment of the Bella Bill. Now, what should you do to oppose this? Currently, this bill is before the Portfolio Committee of Parliament of Basic Education. We are going through the provinces, and we are in Gauteng this weekend from the 5th till the 8th, and in Mpumalanga for one day. And thereafter, we are in KZN next weekend for public hearings. This is part of the democratic process. Your views must be heard by Parliament. We just celebrated Freedom Day on the 27th of April. One of the tenets of our democracy is the people shall govern. So the people must make their voices heard. You must come out in your numbers and oppose this bill. Oppose it on the basis of the undermining of parental rights. The ACDP has got 8 submissions. You can contact us. You can go onto our Facebook if you want to know what are those submissions and what are the clauses that the ACDP opposes that you can use in those public hearings. You have 3 minutes to make a submission. You can either make a public submission orally, or you can make a written submission. We are asking you to come out and make your submissions. You can find out on the ACDP website as well what the schedule of the hearings are, in which municipalities and venues, but come out in your numbers and come and make your voice heard. I want to lastly say, we as Christians, as the church, we can no longer be passive. Our country has been changed from a legislative perspective for many years because we did not know how to engage and how to fight back. Or even, we didn't even have the knowledge on what laws were on the agenda in the legislature. We are saying to you, the time of passivity is over if we want to save this country, save our children, and save the future of this nation. Come out and oppose the Bella Bill. Mr. President, that's my speech. Here from Kenya.
Thank you very much, Marie. Well, while we still have Steve, and load shedding has not caught up with him, Steve, say your last piece. We can say maybe the next 5 or 10 minutes, as long as ESCOM is kind to you, all right? So that I can comment about what Marie said, particularly about the parental rights, which are of utmost importance. Come in, Steve.
President, I just want to conclude by saying, as Maury has so very well put, there is the opportunity until the 22nd of May to make submissions to the National Council of Provinces. We in the ACDP's platforms, we have put the email addresses. We will do that again, but it is very important for us to express our opposition to the hate speech part of this bill. And it is very important that we do that before the 22nd of May. The process is, it has already served before the National Assembly, where it was approved, despite the ACDP and other political parties voting against it. It is now with the NCOP, where there will be a further opportunity for engaging and for public submissions. What we've said, it is very important for us to oppose this bill because it does have a very, very, what is called chilling effect on freedom of expression, on preaching the gospel, on speaking about other issues as well from the pulpit, which is important. And it will have that impact that will limit that right. And this is the first step. We will be ongoing in opposing this. But what is very interesting is during the debate, the ANC member of parliament said that pastors must stick to preaching the gospel and leave all the other things. What right has she got to say that? Yes, preaching the gospel is very, very important. But just as our president today, and we speak as pastors and about choose, how dare anyone want to limit us speaking about issues that are relevant on a day-to-day basis, speaking out against abortion, speaking out against other issues that are of a concern to us as Christians in our nation. And given the fact, President, as well, that hate speech is very narrowly defined, one has a clear intention now from the ANC, as indicated during the debate, that there wants to be a limitation on what we as Christians are saying in this nation. And we will not allow that, President, on our watch. We will pray, we will stand firmly, because we know that it is so important for the voice of the ACDP and the voice of the Christians in South Africa to be heard. Now, it's very important what the Constitutional Court has already said in this regard, President, and it said about the right of freedom of conscience, religion, and thought. It said the right to entertain such religious beliefs as the person chooses, the right to declare religious beliefs openly and without fear of hindrance or reprisal, and the right to manifest religious belief by worship and practice and by teaching and dissemination. So the court has already said that one can express your religious views, can express your religious views on issues of the day, such as Maury is doing on the Bella Bill, and that should not be inhibited. And that is what is sought to be done by this hate speech bill, which we will not allow on our watch. Thank you, President.
Thank you very much, Steve. I like your concluding statement that we will not allow this to happen under our watch. This re-emphasizes the authority that Christians have. We have too many Christians in South Africa who are sleeping. It is time to wake up. It is time to wake up to ensure that your children and children's children have a greater future. Your children and children's children have a future where they are allowed to have freedom of speech, as we will fight for ourselves to have it. Okay? Now, there is, as Bert Werner says, hope the leaders need to hear this and stand for speaking the gospel and teach the Christians in South Africa. He is right. We need to ensure that all leaders, all pastors must hear this. There has been a number of pastors who enjoyed putting their heads under the sand. Now is the time to tell them, hey, trouble is coming. You need to wake up. Now we have Mariki who says parents need to stand up. Forget about the thinking that someone else will fight on your behalf. We have to stand up in numbers to be taken seriously by this government. If there was ever a time to fight for your family and the promise you made as a parent to God to raise your children in the way of the Lord, it is now. Now is the time. She is correct. You know that the scripture even says in Nehemiah 4, fight for your family, fight for your children, fight for your wives. So parents, it is time to wake up. It is time to wake up. Stacy says, I will be at the Friday and Saturday hearings. Looking forward to see ACDP representatives there. Welcome, Stacy. I really hope that the ACDP representatives will be there in large numbers so that our voice can be heard. Now, you must realize that other political parties are liberal and they are comfortable. They don't worry about what government is going to do. They don't worry about actually family values. Now, something that many people don't realize is that at the bottom of all this, you have a government or governments of the world through the United Nations that is planning a new world order. Now, with the new world order, obviously, they tell us a number of things that they are planning to do. They are not hiding them. That's why Christians must stop saying, don't talk about the new world order, because these guys are not hiding what they are planning to do, because they think it's going to be smooth sailing for them. They will do them without anybody objecting. We definitely are going to object. We are definitely going to make a stand. So be aware of what's happening. Now we have Corinne who says, could you comment on the rights of Christian teachers and their refusal to comply? Is there a recourse? You know, there will come a time, Corinne, there will come a time when Christians will pay for their faith, for believing in Christ, for believing in truth. When you are told, as it happened during the days of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you have to bow and worship. There will be times when you say, No, I will not. I will not. I will not. And there might come a time where you will be told you cannot say anything about Jesus. You cannot say, well, these are the end times. I have to comply because the Bible says I must obey those that are in authority. Paul, the disciples of old, the first disciples, they were quick to say, we rather obey God than men. Peter and John, we rather obey God more than men. And then we have Lynn who says, are there any other political parties opposing these bills, or is it just the ACDP? I'm not sure about the hate speech, but definitely they are not taking the angle that the ACDP is taking. Some of them are not speaking now. They will know at the end, but they are not as loud as the ACDP, meaning that some of them are just trying to hide. They're trying to secure their votes. They're trying to say to their voters out there that we also are going to do something about it, but they definitely are not having the convictions that we have as Christians. And many of them, unfortunately, call themselves Christians. Now, Clem says, certainly many Christians are blinded to the truth of the Illuminati New World Order agenda. So true, Clem, so true. They are blinded. You remember that there was a time when Paul, maybe out of frustration, said to the Galatian churches, or the Galatian church, he said, who bewitched you? Who bewitched you? There are Christians who I think they are bewitched. I mean, for Christians to continue supporting people who undermine their faith, their God, I mean, it just shows that something is seriously wrong. So we have to pray for the Lord to open the eyes of the Christians. It is time to wake up. We are living in the last of the last days. In the last of the last days. Now, obviously, I want to touch on the Besta story, and we are going to have an interaction as I'm going to ask questions so that you also could say something about what we are talking about tonight. We are going to also propose solutions that will ensure, obviously, we don't know whether the government is going to take us seriously or not, but that will ensure that there is no repeat of some of the evil things that have happened. Now, in 2012, this Thabo Bester was arrested and convicted for rape and for murder. And he was taken to a maximum security, maximum prison. Now, when they spoke about such a prison, they said to us, oh, it is so secure, nobody can escape. But obviously, it was a private prison in Mangaung, Bloemfontein. Almost a year later, actually 10 years later, in 2022, that gentleman managed to escape from that prison. He escaped last year in May. And there are a number of things, shocking things that have happened that led to this man's escape. I want to read what some of his prison mates have said. And then we'll look at the corruption that has taken place, what has happened, and so on. But maybe before we talk about that, let's look at why such a thing, the main reason what happened would have happened. We know that Bester's mother told us that after his birth at Baragwanath Hospital, he was never given an ID. He was not registered as a child. So when he was arrested, he didn't have an ID. DNA tests were made, obviously linking him to the crime. But the shocking thing was that after it was discovered that the man does not have an ID, he was not given, or the Department of Correctional Services did not collaborate with the Department of Home Affairs to ensure that he has an ID. So the man without an ID managed to escape. The Minister of Home Affairs told the nation that they did not give him the ID because they did not give him even the passport. But now the question is, how did he escape? Corruption in this country has its tentacles in every department, in every community. He was assisted by his girlfriend to escape from prison. But now let's look at his life in prison. What do they say? And this was said by his prison mate, his former prison mate. He said, Bester lived a life of luxury in prison, in the presence of authorities. He wore his own clothes instead of orange overalls. You know, prisoners wear orange overalls. But he says he did not wear orange overalls like everybody else. He wore his own clothes, meaning that every official saw him in his private clothes. Why didn't they query that? Why didn't they ask the question, why is this man getting favors? And we have heard in the media that his girlfriend was allowed to come into prison to spend time with him. And he was also, some weekends, given time to leave prison, to go outside and spend time with his girlfriend. Now, Dr. Putti says, Thabo Bester was walking in and out of prison at will, even before the deadly escape. Now, this is the information that's coming out. Even before he escaped, he was walking out in and out of prison at will. He had a laptop that he used to connect with the international community. He had a laptop. He also ran a scam media company while in prison, holding meetings via Zoom links. I mean, it is a shame. It is a shame. Mendy says, yes, my president, it is a shame how corrupt the government departments are. So imagine a prisoner holding Zoom meetings with people all over the world. They also said he carried cash and boasted that money could buy him anything he wanted. That's why he could go in and out of prison. Now, we have to ask the question, how was this possible? How was this possible? Is government serious about fighting crime in South Africa? I don't think so. I really don't think so. As I said earlier, in 1995, I gave a document to the late Minister of Police, Mr. Steve Tshwete. In that document, we suggested a number of things that should be done to ensure that crime in South Africa is eradicated. One of the things we said was that prisoners should not be treated with kid gloves. Prisoners should be made to know and to feel that crime does not pay, by ensuring that there is no luxury in prison. Now, Thabo Bester obviously boasted about the money he had. And as we said already, he walked in and out. He was in and out of prison. He had free movement. He could bribe the corrupt prison officials. Anytime he wanted to go out. Anytime he wanted, the girlfriend came in. Why? Because he had money. Now, under ACDP government, what would you do to ensure that such a thing does not happen? What would you do? Well, the first important thing is we will not have private prisons. Number one, no private prisons. Prisons should not be more comfortable than people's homes. We know that there are people who are poor in South Africa, people who don't have proper housing. Why should a prisoner have a better life in prison when law-abiding citizens in South Africa were promised a better life that they are not getting? So the ACDP says, firstly, we will ensure that life in prison is not comfortable. People are talking about the rights of prisoners. We agree. with the rights of prisoners. But we will ensure that the rights of prisoners do not trump the rights of law-abiding citizens. Now, Tlotliso again says it is clear that prisoners have more rights than the victims. They eat better than the victims outside who have to go back to work almost immediately after being raped. Now, what he says here reminds me of something. It reminds me of something important that is in our document, that we want all prisoners to work with their hands. When we grew up, we saw prisoners on the roads, on the fields, in the farms, working with their hands. The ACDP would like to see that happening again, so that prisoners should not enjoy a free life, free food, 3 meals a day, when those who are their victims out there are struggling. Now, obviously, people should know that the ACDP has policies and intentions to help South Africa. But one of the most important things is that the criminals will know that crime does not pay. The state has no right to give to prisoners, rapists, murderers, what they cannot give free of charge to law-abiding citizens. One of the reasons we are in the situation we are in, Thabo Bester was managed to escape, is because government does not care. Okay? One of the, actually, Dr. Makudubani's brother, on social media, said that she helped Thabo Bester to escape. After making that statement, he says he was threatened with death. He was threatened, his wife and children were all threatened with death. And then he went to the police to ask for protection. Did the South African police protect him? No. Whistleblowers in South Africa are not protected. And the ACDP believes that whistleblowers are very, very important to overcome criminality in the country. But the ANC is not serious about fighting crime, because they have criminals among themselves. That's what Tracy says, and she's right. So we are saying the ACDP has the remedy. South Africans should know. South Africans will know. Tlotliso happy. Tlotliso is saying something that I just missed now. Under the ACDP government, prisons need to be rehabilitation centers and not as hotels and brothels, as some are modeling themselves to be. Ladies and gentlemen, this family, the brother of Dr. Mandi Park, who has been threatened with death, government is doing nothing to safeguard him and his family. And we have to say, it is wrong. It is wrong. It is true, even as Patricia is saying, crime is worse in South Africa. We are not safe at all. It is very true. Government knows that people in South Africa are not safe. Are they doing enough? I don't think so. Government is not doing enough. So we need to tell the population. We need to tell our neighbors. We need to tell our people. This government has not shown any interest in eradicating crime. Now, the people of Gauteng, I know, are very happy that Deli Sufi has come up with a good idea. We are going to have people who will be patrolling our streets, ensuring that crime is reduced. Friends, can I tell you that the Minister of Police has said it is not going to work as many people are saying? The wardens that Ndateli Sufi, Premier Sufi spoke about, that will be released. He says in the streets, he says they were trained long enough. No, they were not trained enough. But now, the shocking thing is that the Minister of Police today said Those wardens will not be armed. Will not be armed. Now tell me, the minister says they will not be armed. Now, if they are not armed, if they are found with arms that the police did not clear, then there's going to be trouble. We cannot hope in this government. The ANC government is not interested in our safety and security. That's why the ACDP says time for change is now. Domino says prisoners should lose all rights. Prisoners should lose all rights the minute they violate law-abiding citizens' rights, especially when it comes to violent crime. Well, you know that the international community is not going to agree with that. I agree with that, but the international community is not going to agree with that. Lawlessness is what they want. The UN is happy with lawlessness. So that when there is confusion all over, people are unhappy all over, they will say, you see, governments of the world have failed to bring law and order. Now we want to bring one world government, one government that will ensure that there is order. This is part of the plan. What's happening is part of the plan. But the ACDP, obviously, friends, believe in the sovereignty of countries. We do not believe that the rights of countries to protect their citizens should be taken away by one government. And if a government in any country fails, then that government must be replaced. That's why the ACDP members must say, the current government, the ANC government, is failing. It's failing. So what should we do? Let's remove them. You look at the drugs they allow in the streets. These drugs, friends, I promise you, they can be removed from society if we have a government that is serious. They are allowing our children to lose their brains, our children to be destroyed by drugs, so that posterity is destroyed. Now, this is part of the plan of the New World Order. Lance Rodboom says, the biggest criminals in South Africa is the ANC. They have collapsed everything. He is so right. They have collapsed everything that used to work. That's why we must remove them from power in 2024. High five, Lance. I agree with you, sir. We must remove them from power because they have collapsed everything. You know the homelands. The homelands used to be clean. The homelands, Buputatswana, Mafikeng, used to be so clean. Today, potholes all over because of the ANC. The late president of Buputatswana, Ndate Mangope, used to say, Helena, these criminals are going to, he said it Kasetswana, but only so clear. They are going to cause you a lot of trouble. They are going to cause you lots of trouble. And people didn't take him seriously. He was right. He was right. What's happening in the country today is because of the ANC that does not care. Now, a few things again, going back to the Bester story. This Thabo Bester, with his girlfriend and a Mozambican, escaped from South Africa, went out through the borders. How and where, that we are not sure. But the fact is, they managed to skip the country. On this one, let me ask you a question. There are individuals that have said, do away with borders. We want to be one Africa with free movement. Do away with borders. Do you agree that we should do away with borders? We know many borders of South Africa are useless because they're porous. Criminals just come in and out the way they want. I heard the Minister of Home Affairs last week, well, maybe it was on a video clip, lamenting the number of high-profile criminals in South Africa. He was saying to his comrades, this is not on. criminals are coming, the worst criminals are coming from all over the world. Even the African Union and the UN are commenting about the criminals that are in South Africa from all over the world because government does not care. The borders are porous. Okay? Melida Lebisa. I was once a victim of station commander who revealed my name to the perpetrator after I reopened the case. ANC is a hell government. Now, what will the ACDP do if we have a station commander who reveals a whistleblower, the details of a whistleblower? What should we do? What should be done about them? I want to propose 3 things, and you tell me which one do you think will be the best. Such a police officer should lose his job. Or such a police officer should be given a heavy fine that we have to discuss. Or there has to be a law with sentences, minimum sentences for police officers who are involved in crime and police officers who are allowing criminals to know who are trying to help fight crime by exposing them as whistleblowers and allowing these people to harass the criminals. The law-abiding citizens. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe the ACDP. Wayne Thring, my deputy, says the solution to the crime problem in South Africa is the ACDP. Well said, my bro, well said. The solution to crime in South Africa is the African Christian Democratic Party. So you are friends, are members, are followers. I see Aline Ross says, all 3, Mr. President, the 3 things I said should be considered. He says all of them. Long sentences. Kathy Stewart agrees. Give those now Nora says they must lose their job. Okay? Long sentences, they must lose their job. There must also be fines. 3 of them. Okay? They tell the people this is what the ACDP will do. Because when we do this, we know that people will be encouraged to come forward and expose these criminals, come forward and report the criminals they know. And once that happens, I promise you, crime in South Africa will be done a death blow. Marvin Charles Christians III, he says, whistleblowers should be protected at all costs. At all costs. I agree. And Fallon says, dismiss police who are corrupt. Now, in South Africa, they are not. And Wongi says all three. Criminals in South Africa are protected. The police in South Africa who are corrupt are protected. They are taken from one police station to another police station. It's like government officials who are corrupt. They are taken from one department to the next department. It's like cabinet ministers who are also found with their hands in the cookie jar. They are also involved in criminality. What happens to them? Rather than them be fired, they are given other responsibilities in different portfolios and in different departments. ACDP is the way to go. Regine Dees will not only have the solutions, we are the solutions. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Thank you very much for interacting with us. Thank you very much for being part of the winning team. Let us tell everybody about the ACDP. Let's not just celebrate and rejoice in our few numbers. Let's talk to our neighbors. Let's take the message of the ACDP all over South Africa so that our footprint in South Africa will increase. And next year, people will know, now we want peace, now we want law and order in the country. And the only party we can vote for is the African Christian Democratic Party. The Lord bless you. God bless you. Until next week, have a blessed week.